Somewhere along the way, you stopped describing burnout like something you were experiencing and started describing it like something you are. Not out loud, not always, but in the quiet way you introduce yourself to your own mind. I'm tired. I'm drained. I'm just not built like other people. I've always been this way. And the most dangerous part is how believable it starts to feel. So let me ask you a question that cuts through the story you've been carrying. What if burnout isn't your personality at all, but a nervous system state you've been living in so long it started wearing your name? Because that's what states do when they last long enough. They turn into identity. They make you forget that your body knows other climates. They make you forget what ease felt like before you had to earn it. And they keep you working, smiling, answering, producing, holding it together, while something inside you quietly learns that life is not safe unless you are braced for impact. You know the feeling. You wake up tired, even after sleep. You run on caffeine and obligation. Your body feels wired and heavy at the same time, like it's gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles while begging to pull over. You get through the day, but you don't feel inside the day. The smallest email feels like a threat. The simplest decision feels like lifting stone. Someone asks you a normal question, and your chest tightens as if you're being accused. And then the shame comes because on paper you might be fine. You're functional. You're doing what needs to be done. You're not falling apart in ways that earn compassion. You're just slowly disappearing behind the tasks. You start thinking you've become colder, lazier, harder to love, harder to motivate. You start thinking the best version of you is gone. You start thinking your softness was a phase you outgrew. But what if the truth is simpler and deeper at the same time? What if your system isn't failing you? What if it's protecting you? There's a reason burnout feels so personal. It touches everything. It alters your appetite, your sleep, your patience, your memory, your libido, your tolerance, your hope. It's not just work stress. It's a full-body reallocation of resources. When your nervous system decides that life requires constant readiness, it starts spending your energy like there will be no tomorrow. And if you've been living under pressure for long enough, your body does something both brilliant and heartbreaking. It adapts. It makes high alert feel normal. It makes numbness feel stable. It makes disconnection feel efficient. It makes you mistake survival for personality. This is the quiet shift the nervous system state's codex is designed to reveal. Not as a label to trap you, but as a lens to finally explain why you can't think your way out of what you're feeling. Because burnout is not a mindset issue, it's a state issue. And states change when the body is shown safety, not when the mind is told to be stronger. Here's what most people don't realize until they hit the wall. Your nervous system doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your survival. It doesn't measure success by your calendar. It measures it by whether you can breathe without bracing. When the world feels unsafe, the body moves into protection. Sometimes protection looks like fight, where you become irritable, controlling, sharp, easily provoked. Sometimes it looks like flight, where you become restless, overworking, busy, unable to sit still, always chasing the next task so you don't have to feel what's underneath. And sometimes it looks like shutdown, where your energy collapses, your emotions flatten, your motivation disappears, and even pleasure feels distant, as if your system turned down the volume to conserve what little it has left. None of these are character flaws. They are strategies. And the tragedy is that they work at first. They keep you moving. They keep you performing. They keep you acceptable. Until one day they stop feeling like strategies and start feeling like your only way to be. That's when people start saying, "This is just who I am now." No. That's what a long-held state sounds like when it becomes your home. To understand this more deeply, you have to understand where this lens came from and why it matters. The codex calls it nervous system states and frames it through a soft, polyvagal approach because it's less interested in diagnosing you and more interested in naming the body's patterns: safety, stress, regulation, shutdown, and return. The modern language comes from neuroscience, from researchers who mapped how the autonomic nervous system shifts between protection and connection. But the deeper truth is older than the lab. Ancient body wisdom has always known what modern people forget. The body is not a machine that should run at the same speed every day. It is an animal intelligence that scans, senses, and responds. Fight, flight, freeze, restoration, threat and safety, tension and release. Many older cultures didn't need the word polyvagal to recognize the pattern. They built rituals around it. They created communal rhythms that brought the body back to calm. They used breath, song, movement, warmth, and community as regulation, not as aesthetic. Because they understood something we've been trained to deny. The body returns to itself in relationship, not in isolation. Burnout, in that sense, is not just too much work. It's too much threat for too long, and too little safety on the other side of it. And now, you can see why burnout feels like a personality shift. Because your state changes how you perceive the world. In a stressed state, neutral faces look suspicious. In a stressed state, rest feels unsafe. In a stressed state, you can't access your own tenderness, not because it's gone, but because your system thinks tenderness will cost too much. This is why the same person can feel like 3 different people across a lifetime, not because they're inconsistent, but because their nervous system is driving the experience of being alive. You can see it in real life everywhere, once you know what you're looking at. You see it in the high achiever who keeps adding pressure because stillness feels like failure. They aren't addicted to work. They're addicted to the feeling of control that work provides when their body is afraid. They say they thrive under pressure. But what they mean is they know how to function in fight and flight. Then a quiet weekend arrives, and their anxiety spikes for no reason. That no reason is the nervous system saying, "We don't recognize this lack of threat. Stay alert." You see it in caregivers and medical workers who ran on adrenaline for years, who carried other people's pain like a second skin, who learned to be calm in emergencies, but couldn't find calm in their own kitchen. When the crisis ends, they don't relax. They crash. They feel numb, distant, unable to engage with the life they supposedly got back. That's not weakness. That's the cost of sustained mobilization without enough safe return. You see it in public-facing moments too, when highly visible performers step back and the world calls it quitting. But often it's not quitting. It's the nervous system refusing to keep paying the bill. When an athlete or an artist says, "I can't do this right now," what you are witnessing is not a loss of ambition. It's a boundary emerging from the body's survival intelligence. And you see it in the ordinary person who doesn't look like a headline. The parent who snaps at their kid and then cries alone because they don't recognize their own voice. The student who used to be driven and now can't read a page without dissociating. The partner who loves deeply but can't feel anything during conflict because shutdown has become the safest option. These aren't separate problems. They're variations of the same pattern. The body choosing protection over connection because protection has been demanded for too long. And if that's you, then your personality change is not the real story. The real story is that your nervous system has been working overtime to keep you standing. This is where the meaning of burnout becomes almost sacred, if you let it. Burnout is often the moment the body stops negotiating. It's the moment it says, "I will not be used like this anymore." It's not just exhaustion. It's a refusal to keep living in constant defense. And here's the relief hidden inside that truth. If burnout is a state, then it can shift. Not with force, not with hustle disguised as healing, but with consistent signals of safety that teach your system it no longer has to brace. The goal is not to become someone who never gets stressed. The goal is to become someone who returns. Because the difference between resilient people and burnt out people is not pain. It's recovery. It's the ability to move out of threat and back into regulation without shame. So what does it look like to work with your state instead of fighting it? It begins with honest recognition. Not dramatic. Not self-pathologizing. Just true. When you feel yourself snapping, rushing, scrolling, overworking, freezing, disappearing, ask a gentle question that doesn't accuse you. What state am I in right now? Not what's wrong with me. Not why can't I be normal. What state am I in? That question alone changes the relationship. It turns identity into pattern recognition. It tells your body, "I'm listening," instead of "I'm disappointed." Then start making your world smaller in the ways that actually matter. Burnout loves a life filled with invisible demands. Too many open tabs. Too many conversations you're managing. Too many obligations you agreed to because you didn't want to be difficult. Your nervous system doesn't separate work from life, from relationships, from the internet. It feels load and it responds. So soften the load where you can. Not as a grand reset, but as a series of accurate reductions. Fewer commitments that require performance. Fewer environments that keep your body braced. More space between stimulation and sleep. More moments where nothing is required of you except being alive. You can also practice orienting. A simple act that tells the nervous system you are here and you are not in danger. Look around the room slowly. Let your eyes land on ordinary objects. Notice the color of something, the shape of a corner, the sound of a distant room. This isn't spiritual, it's biological. It moves you out of an internal alarm and back into the present environment. Breath matters too, but not in the way people make it sound like a magic trick. In a stressed state, your breath becomes shallow because your body is preparing to act. So give it a long exhale, not to calm down, but to signal that action is not required in this moment. When the exhale lengthens, the body receives a message. The chase has paused, and if shutdown has been your default, the invitation is different. You don't force yourself into high intensity. You warm the system gently. Sunlight, warm drinks, slow walks, music that reaches you, human connection that feels safe, even if it's brief. Shutdown is not fixed by discipline. It's softened by safe aliveness. Finally, create one boundary that makes your body feel respected. Not a boundary that proves something, a boundary that reduces threat. Maybe it's not answering messages after a certain hour. Maybe it's one day a week with fewer social obligations. Maybe it's saying no without explaining your whole life story. The nervous system reads boundaries as protection when they are consistent, and consistent protection is what builds safety. None of this is fast, but it's real. It's a return process, and every small signal you offer becomes part of the retraining, because you are not trying to fix yourself. You are teaching your body it doesn't have to live on guard. And then something begins to happen that feels almost unfamiliar. You start noticing tiny pockets of calm, not constant calm, just moments where your jaw unclenches without you forcing it, moments where your shoulders drop, moments where you laugh and it feels like it reaches your eyes, moments where you rest and you don't feel like you're doing something wrong. Your thoughts become clearer because they're no longer being filtered through threat. Your relationships feel lighter because you're not trying to connect from survival. Your work becomes more honest because you're no longer using output to medicate anxiety. And in that shift, you begin to meet yourself again, not as a burnt-out version, but as a regulated version who had been waiting behind the noise. This is the after that matters. Not a perfect life, not a stress-free future, just a you who can come back to yourself. A you who recognizes, I was in a state, and the state made a home in me, but it doesn't get to own me. Transformation is internal first. It happens before the calendar changes. It happens when your nervous system stops believing it must earn safety. And when that belief breaks, your life starts to feel possible again. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I want you to answer it with honesty, not performance. When you look at your last 2 weeks, which state have you been living in most often? And what is one small, real signal of safety your body has been quietly asking you for? Burnout isn't your identity. It's your body's emergency language. And the moment you stop calling it who I am is the moment your system eventually gets permission to come home. If this gave you language for what you've been living, share in the comments which state you recognized yourself in and what helped you feel even 1% safer today. Subscribe if you want more episodes that decode the patterns beneath the pain, so you can live with clarity instead of constant defense.